But thank you so much for coming along today for our Teams Voice for Education webinar. Today, we've very kindly got one of our customers joined, Ed Avenell from LSEC. Ed, thank you so much for coming along.
You're welcome.
Ed is the CEO, Head of Estates at LSEC, who we've worked for a long time. And we're covering a little bit today around challenges that he's seen, challenges we've solved, and some more broader kind of technology issues we see in the market. And then we've all got our very own Mike Gilroy-Scott, our Head of Technology. Thank you as well, Mike.
Always good to be here.
Myself, co-founder of Formation Tech. So thank you. For today, we've got the option to use the chat function. So please do ask any questions. We like to make these as collaborative as possible. So anything we say, any kind of questions you have, please do feel free to ask. But the topic for today, communications for education is key for any organization, but especially education. A lot of these organizations are still relying on legacy technology. It's not kept pace with the changing working practices. It's causing other issues. And a lot of schools are looking to address that. Amongst standardizing a lot of other technology, that lends itself to Microsoft and bringing it together from a management and user perspective. Ed, today, he's got experience in both the private and public sector of education. He's at the forefront of driving a lot of technology change for LSEC to meet the needs of what they're doing today, a lot of stuff of where they're going. But today for the webinar, we'll be discussing some of the common pain points that exist running legacy communication platforms in education. We'll cover a high-level view on Microsoft Teams Voice. What does it do as a standard? How you can enhance it? We'll then look at that contextually for education. Look at some use cases and a bit about what the future holds. But I think we're really here to hear from Ed today. So I guess before we go into the details around that, Ed, do you want to perhaps give us a bit of an overview of your role at LSEC and more broadly the sort of challenges and growth plans you've got there?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. My role here, I oversee IT for the group. So it's London South East Colleges as well as the Multi-Academy Trust, which is London South East Academies Trust. More recently, I also oversee estates for the organisation. I've been here for a couple of years now, and I've worked in education for quite a lot of my career, but I also worked in the corporate world. In terms of education, I've worked in international schools, state schools, and boarding schools. So I've got quite a broad experience there. The college is 7 sites made up of about 10,000 students, about 1,000 staff. And the Multi-Academy Trust is currently 13 schools, 15 sites with a few thousand students and about 1,000 staff as well. So we're not a small organisation. The Multi-Academy Trust is growing quite rapidly. We're at 13 schools at the moment. We will probably be double in size in about a year and a half's time. So there's a big focus on growth there. The college is fairly static, but it's quite a complex beast. And overseeing the two, there's some differences and there's some similarities across the piece.
Yeah, and I know from conversations we've had, you've got an enormous mix of different providers in amongst that within the schools you're adopting, and obviously talk about the pain points today. But the rationalisation process, I know has removed a lot of that headache for the core LSEC environment that we currently look at.
Yes.
Sorry, Ed, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of that legacy setup, there's a lot of complexity under the hood there, and a kind of big part of my job at the moment, especially in the trust, is to get that standardized and stabilized, and I can talk about that a bit more.
Yeah, and I think for most of the audience today, I think they're probably in that world you were in, where your entire estate was legacy. So right now, we'll come on to it in a bit, but your core kind of platform is now in Microsoft Teams, and that is a good platform for you for a number of reasons, hopefully we'll cover today. But to those pain points, that you had, and how they represented and manifested for LSEC. Do you want to perhaps go into those in a bit more detail so we can share that with the people here today?
So the college was on a Mitel platform, so it was a traditional SIP platform. It was quite old, probably about 10 years old. We had issues around support. The equipment that we were using was not current. There were no firmware upgrades available. We were struggling to find parts, and it was a bit of a headache to support. We didn't have a lot of the skills in-house to manage that either. So anything that veered off business as usual was something that did hit the business quite badly. And over time, I've only been in the organisation just over a couple of years, and we had a number of outages that were causing serious headaches. We have lots of students, and as a result, we have potential safeguarding risks, lots of health and safety issues, and again, these are things that we need to react to quickly. And a call to Lado or to the police or whatever can't happen if the phone system's not working. So this was a constant headache for me. Teams was something that we were all aware of, we were already using, certainly because of COVID, that became front and center really in terms of a platform that we could use for communication. And it was a logical step to look at Teams as a potential replacement to the Mitel platform. We did look at other platforms. Google Voice was one of those. We looked at replacing Mitel system as well. But our long-term strategy, included Teams as a significant part of it. So there was an obvious choice to be made there.
Yeah, and we talked about this prior, and I'm not sure I'd necessarily appreciate this quite so much, but given your broader strategy around Microsoft and Teams for everything outside of voice was something you're looking to embrace. By bringing voice into the application, how did that help you with that journey and your staff and support teams?
Yeah, so I suppose from our average member of staff's perspective is they would use Teams for group meetings. So we would have certain events where they would click a calendar invite and drop in, but it wasn't particularly familiar to them beyond just entering a meeting. Teams has an enormous capability, and we are a Microsoft house. We are platform agnostic, which means we have all sorts of end user devices, but in terms of that core collaboration platform, Microsoft is in our strategy and will be for a long time. Teams Voice was an obvious choice in terms of replacing the Mitel platform, and actually taking that on, what that did is really focus staff attention on the Teams platform. It was a platform they use every day. They became more familiar with it, and what that's allowed us to do is then to start incrementally adding new features that staff can use. So there are things around AI and various other tools that we are beginning to roll out, but Teams is really the next generation web browser. Really, it's that core bit of software that people will use every day that have multiple uses.
And in terms of rolling the platform out onto voice, you have in-house expertise in the Microsoft platform. You look after in a number of different areas, and you had considered different routes to deployment. So obviously, we ended up working with you on that. But for the interests of the people joining who may be looking through his various decisions, like what did you consider? What did you look at? What were the sort of end options that sort of made the shortlist for you?
So I've got a team of 15, and that covers operational support, so end user support, staff and students. We have an infrastructure team and kind of some classroom-oriented staff around embedding technology. We because of challenges around finances in the sector, we don't have any wiggle room really around how we use those staff. They are utilised 100%, and that was a big part of our decision to move to an outsource model. We did consider doing this ourselves. Microsoft offer their vanilla service where they license themselves. They provide phone lines, and we are able to manage the platform. It's not something we're unable to do. But I think that for anybody who manages a team of staff, is that out of those 15, we'll have people on holiday, we'll have people sick. We'll have technical challenges that they just don't know how to handle. And there was a lot of risk around that. And if we're looking at Microsoft Teams as being a core technology for delivering not only telephony, but other things, it's got to work 100% of the time. And that includes out of hours as well. So, the models we looked at were driven partly around resourcing. There were also considerations around cost. The Microsoft licensing, especially at the scale that we're looking at, where we have lots of phone lines, several hundred staff on the system, it got very, very expensive. So we needed to look at another model, and what we settled on was kind of using SIP trunks provided by Formation and all the expertise that comes with that to set up the system using best practice. And what that allowed me to do then is hand over a system to my team that was set up correctly. And in the event of issues, we can escalate to Formation. And that works really well. And it works so well, actually, that we're kind of taking that kind of way of working to other areas of the business. So, we have lots of Apple devices rather than hiring in expertise at great cost. We outsource that as well. So it's a model that works really well for us.
Putting on a cost and a practical level, before we go into a bit more detail around Microsoft Teams and some of its sort of features and advantages, a common kind of debate we have, which a lot of IT managers are on side with, is handsets, because people have always had a handset somewhere, and so it's a fairly capex light. Our position is to try and reduce as much plastic and as much physical hardware as possible. And you've had that debate battle a few times and quite successfully kind of won that, in that very few handsets tend to get deployed. There's obviously safeguarding requirements, but just quickly touch on that from a user perspective, and also a general kind of how you position out of the business. Because I know there's a lot of people in your position trying to talk to their wider teams to say, hey, we don't need to spend all this money on handsets to move to this. How would you kind of cover that for the people here?
Yeah, so I think if we did a like-for-like replacement with the MyTel system, we would have spent, I don't know, 60,000+ pounds on handsets, and that was just not feasible, really. As you said, you talked about safeguarding. Yes, we have a requirement for staff to make phone calls in emergencies, and we had to find a balance where they could still make phone calls, but we weren't spending lots of money on equipment that would just sit idle for long periods of time. So I don't think that conversation is totally finished, but I'll give you an example. We had a phone in every classroom, and we've got 300 classrooms, and those phones would largely remain unused. I think one of the advantages of Teams is that we have multiple end user devices. People have company mobiles, they have personal mobiles, they have their laptop. We gave out headsets to all staff, and we continue to do that. But we have pushed the flexibility of the platform as a way of persuading people that we don't need handsets everywhere. We still installed some. We put some in open spaces, staff rooms, kind of areas where large amounts of people congregate. We couldn't take away handsets entirely, but people view Teams telephony not really just as a phone system. So I think they are now they're on board with this in terms of that flexibility. We're now looking at BYOD in a greater way. So staff have mobiles. Can we leverage that as part of the telephony estate? And people understand the flexibility of Teams. So most people are quite willing to install Teams on their personal device. So again, that makes them very contactable. We do still have some staff mobiles, but again, because of the success of Teams, we are looking at the estate, the mobile phone estate, which is a couple of hundred handsets and some SIM cards that we need to pay for on a monthly basis. We're looking at Teams actually providing an alternative to that. I'll give you an example. Because we work in education with young learners, we do need to speak to parents and learners on a regular basis. If we did that, if staff were doing that from a personal device, that would present some safeguarding risk, because we, for obvious reasons, we have direct contact with students, and we, that is unlogged, if you like, and that presents a risk at the scale that we're working at. So Teams are a useful solution to that. Teams telephony is that we've given almost all staff a direct dial number, and they can dial in, they can dial out on that number. It's logged, and they don't need to worry about the fact that they're exposing their personal mobile phone number. And from a safeguarding perspective, that works really well. From a governance perspective, it works really well as well. So if there are ever any issues, we can track that through reporting.
Yeah, and it doesn't also negate the need to go to a specific room, a staff room, or an area to go make that call. It can be done in a place of their choice, at a time of their choice, to a degree.
Indeed, yeah.
So I've got Mike, our head of tech, on the call here, and I think just before we go into a few more use cases, I think there's a lot of stuff Teams does natively, and there's a topic today which is around advanced voice capabilities. I think Brian's got a question. I don't know if you want to ask that, Brian, as I introduce this next section. If you want to type that into the chat, please feel free to do so. But yeah, Mike, just while Brian's typing his question, I've seen his hand get raised there. Voice native, voice advanced, it's a big topic. How do you cover that for the people here?
Yeah, and Ed's done a really good job, actually. He keeps mentioning the flexibility of the Teams platform, and even today, in 2024, back end of it, we're still having conversations with businesses and education around the capabilities of the voice piece of Microsoft Teams. Everyone by now is pretty familiar with the platform from a collaboration, from a video, kind of remote working, a mobile access. That's incredibly mature and powerful, and probably right at the top of the list of choices that people would want for those kind of things. But I think what tells behind it is the adoption of the voice services. So there's hundreds of millions of users on Microsoft Teams, but there's only sort of around, I say only 30 million users on Teams phone. And the reasons for that are sometimes quite puzzling, but I suppose it's obvious if you understand kind of the market. Now, I think there's a perception that Teams doesn't really have the sort of phone capabilities that it does have, but actually when you look below the surface and you understand it, it's an incredibly flexible and powerful system, and it has all the features that you need. Does it have as many features as the old PBXs, which had sort of 740 published features? Probably not, but does it have all the features that you want it to use? Yes, it does. Can it do IVRs? Yes, it can. Can it do call keys? Yes, it can. Can it do kind of all the other features you might use within a phone system for routing calls and getting things out? Yes, it can. But is it perfect? Does it complete the picture? Probably not. But because it's Microsoft, it's got this enormous ecosystem of partners to fill the gaps, because they'll happily fix any kind of shortcomings. And I'll just give a brief couple of examples of those. So some businesses might be used to having a sort of operator console reception style central point for all the calls for the organization to come into. Now, Teams is perfectly capable of handling lots of calls and distributing them, hold, transfer, etc., consult, transfer to voicemail. That's all included. But what if your kind of call volumes are more stringent than that? Then yeah, there's a gap for an attendant console kind of application, and there's various vendors who go, that's fine, you don't have to go to Microsoft for that, we've built something for you, and it's native to Teams, and there's nothing to deploy, it's all runs in the application, and it's super simple to use, right? The other one is call reporting. Now, this is quite a big one, actually. So everyone just assumes that everything that happens in Teams is logged and it goes somewhere, which it does, but it's got a shelf life. Like Teams will hold that data for 28 days and then it will delete it. So if you want to provide a month's worth of call reporting for your organization, you've got 28 days, and that's your option. So plugging in a tool to take that data out and then give you the capability to report on monthly, yearly, quarterly, whatever you need to do, then you can fill that sort of gap. So whilst it doesn't exist natively, it's incredibly easy to plug these kind of things in and solve those kind of problems. The other thing is, and Ed touched on this right at the beginning, is kind of how you get your calls into Microsoft. A lot of people hold off because they think, I don't want Microsoft to be my telco, right? And the good news is you don't need to, right? It's easy to plug in SIP trunks or go to an operator to do these sorts of things, or rely, like Ed did, is rely on a company like us to solve all those questions and those challenges, and just essentially consume it, because that is our expertise. That is the thing that we do. So we're more than happy to help people with that thing. That's what we focus on. That's what we specialize on, and we help organizations achieve Teams telephony in that way.
So Brian has very creatively messaged me directly. He's for some reason unable to message in the chat, but he's basically said, the question for you, Ed, is licensing model and how we manage this for all his staff. Is that okay?
Shall I take that one, or Ed? Is it Ed?
Well, I'll tell you about kind of the bits that we do, and there'll be a sort of a link into how you manage that for us. But we have a volume license agreement with a supplier. We have A5 licensing now for most staff, not all. That gives us quite a broad tool set from Microsoft. I mentioned about AI, and there are other things around Power BI and whatever that we are using or would like to use. We've brought that through a framework, and it's and part of that A5 licensing is some of the basics around Teams telephony, and we kind of hand off some of the allocation of that to formation, which, Mike, if I can hand over to you, because I'll be honest, that's an area that I don't really get involved in on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, so part of the service that we provide is that kind of day-to-day moves, adds, changes, license assignment, number assignment, policy assignment. That's all done by our service team, to sort of lift that workload. So the day-to-day changes, which happen all the time for all organizations, it can be time consuming, especially if you're larger. And, we've got a specialist team here who deal with all of those sorts of things. so either through scripting or through PowerShell, etc. So, just get things done really.
So, Mike, you meant, sorry, do you have something to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that just works very well for us. I think, as you said, we're working at scale. There are a lot of changes. I think we're dependent on particular individuals internally to make those changes. The ability for us to just raise a ticket and obviously you automate some of this is a godsend really, because it just works.
Fantastic. Mike, you mentioned call logging moments ago. Now you can natively get this within the Graph API. It's a bit messy and it's a bit techy, and it requires a good amount of experience to interpret it.
Absolutely. Microsoft don't hide the Graph API. It's there for anyone to access. And I think, you could spend some time, if you were dab hand of Power BI, pulling that all out, etc. But if that's your bag, then go ahead. We've got a team of developers to do that. We operate a platform for our customers where that's already been solved, right? So you just need to consume that service. So if reporting is key to your organization for either safeguarding reasons or kind of just coming back to the most common thing is we've been told we've got missed calls. We can't prove it one way or the other because it was more than 28 days ago, or for whatever reason it was. That call accounting can be achieved at extremely low cost and very effectively. You just log into a web page, look at your stats, find what you're trying to look for, and then go, right, that is the information that I need, which if you were native in Teams, that would be challenging. Let's put it that way.
And I think, Ed, use case perspective, call logging, there are some important times of the year. Telephony, is materially, it's at all times it's important, but obviously student onboarding and registration, it's quite a key time. Do you want to perhaps go into that in a bit more detail?
So I'll give you an example of, we are further education college, and we have kind of quite big commercial pressures when we are going through our commercial times of year where we're trying to persuade students to sign up. The telephone system is hot, there's a lot going on, and there are often cases where the curriculum staff or those involved in enrollment are concerned that call volumes aren't where they should be, and rather than us trying to hunt through quite complex logs, we have a platform where we can very quickly report on the status of the phone system and provide some assurance that the technology is doing its job. Just another use case is, we have 10,000 students in the college, and there are often safeguarding issues that we need to be aware of, and the phone system needs to be functioning. And we'll often have cases where parents say, well, we did call in and no one picked up, or there've been maybe calls needed to make to LADO or some other safeguarding organization that haven't worked for some reason, and we're able to validate that those calls and verify those calls have taken place, and essentially move the concern away from the technology onto other areas that need to be followed up. So that was a significant problem for us previously, where it was really easy for people to blame the tech, and we've now moved away from that.
Yeah, and staying on the theme of kind of I guess the management of platform, and also the health and safety compliance piece and safeguarding. I think previously you might have had one person who maybe knew the MITRE, and certainly you had an outsourced company looking after it as well. But being natively in Teams, whilst we do a lot of the heavy lifting day to day, if you need to create a dynamic, create a new call flow or group for a particular function, you have a level of competency in-house to do that as well, given the ubiquitous understanding of the Microsoft platform.
Yeah, and it's not restricted to us, so it's not like we don't have visibility on that, and that is a challenge across our technology. Is for systems that we don't directly control, if we don't have visibility on that, we can't tell what's going on. And what is helpful here is we can see what's going on. We can make changes ourselves if we want to, but if it's too complex or there are other challenges, we can just escalate that.
We've got about 5 minutes left. Another question coming. I don't know why our chat's not working, but please feel free to direct them directly to ourselves or ask us afterwards if you're having a challenge. But there's a question coming via Carl. Edward, I've struggled to get my internal buy-in from my SLT and governors. Any suggestions to get them on board? I mean, obviously we covered a fair bit of stuff today. How would you answer that? What would be your kind of go-to position on that?
A pilot is probably the most straightforward thing to do. I think that getting the technology into decision makers' hands is probably the best way. It speaks for itself quite quickly. I don't know whether you're using Teams yet or not, but I think that if you're not, there needs to be an understanding of the scale of scale of opportunity really with Teams. Is if you look at Teams Phone, it's just one of these components, part of the jigsaw puzzle. I think that familiarity with Teams would really help in terms of that buy-in. That's probably my main suggestion there.
And I think, we use Teams obviously for this webinar. There's a bit of AI automation in the background. It will summarize and it will cover a lot of the case studies. So we can very happily share those key points, those user cases you've talked about. They're applicable to all schools. Some of those will resonate more in one school than another, but they're all relevant. And I think, perhaps we can share that will help you with that journey. More broadly, I think, we talked about voice in Teams enabling the broader use of Teams, and you've got other things that are costing you money, which are enabling you to push the boundaries a little bit further, Ed. I mean, I think something, you're saying you spend a lot of money on a CB radio platform. Now, obviously, that's probably something a school of your size uses, may not be appropriate to all schools. But, what other things is this kind of foray into Microsoft and Teams enabling you to look at other cost benefits and other functional things that are improving the way you work and saving you money?
Okay, so I'll just talk about the walkie-talkie issue. So they're quite costly in terms of licensing and the hardware as well. So rough figure is about £1,000 per device if we look at total cost of ownership. And then to do that at scale means it's not practical for everybody to use that. There is a walkie-talkie functionality built into Teams, and what it allowed us to do is remove that cost of hardware and the licensing associated with running the CB radios, and just embed it into Teams. And again, because it's a familiar tool and they're likely already carrying a device that will be compatible with it, it was quite a natural extension there, and it came at almost zero cost for us to roll that out. So that's being used at the moment by health and safety related staff. So in the event of emergency, there is a call queue there for staff that are on site and available. And if there's any emergencies, we call the health and safety line and someone will pick up. So that's incredibly useful. Other things that we're using Teams for, you talked about AI. Yeah, the Copilot integration is amazing. We use it regularly in meetings in terms of, summarizing meetings and creating action points. What that does is change the dynamic around EAs and PAs. So we have individuals in the organization whose job is to kind of grease the wheels in meetings and make sure, notes are taken and that kind of thing. Their focus now has changed to helping in other areas because the functional elements of managing a meeting are already done. We're looking at Teams in teaching, so we recognize the value of Teams meeting rooms, and making available at our sites facilities that are already set up that can accommodate a number of people. They're becoming embedded in our working cultures as well. Is that if there's a group of you that want to meet with another group of people that's somewhere else, go to a Teams meeting room. They're simple to use. We try to keep those consistent across the estate, and they're quite cheap to do. Gone are the days of spending $100+ grand on a proprietary meeting platform. We're just using what we use already in just a slightly larger scale. So these things are proliferating around the business, and we're finding other reasons that we can use and other ways we can use Teams.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We're almost at the half an hour mark. And so I always like to finish. We do webinars fairly regularly, and we've got certain topics we're covering today, but it's always good to finish on a more broader technology note. And you within your role, you get a lot of visibility on technology, and you have a lot of visions for how the future of education is going to be supported by technology. So what things are keeping you busy and interested, and more broadly for the people here today, what would you like to share with them, Ed, around the technology areas that are interesting to you think are going to really shape and change education in the future?
So I've got an estates hat as well as an IT one, and one of my areas of focus is around smart buildings. We have a large estate, and there are often times when that estate, there's parts of it that aren't being used, and I think that we make decisions around how we use that estate as a desktop exercise, paper-based exercise, and it's really, really inefficient. But we have lots of things gathering data on our network already. We have door entry systems, we have occupancy things that we'd like to look at. We have temperature and light sensors and all these kind of things. And what I'd like to do is aggregate all of that data so that we can make business decisions out the back of that. And that's quite an expensive thing to do. So we're taking quite an organic approach, and we found that actually we do have some of the expertise in-house to do this. We're just taking little steps and seeing where this leads to. And a really interesting one has come up today is that because of temperatures heading below zero, is that we have an adverse weather policy that needs to be enacted really early in the morning. We need to say, is a site open or shut? And what I'm looking to do is to take weather sensor readings and Transport for London data using the API and kind of other information like CCTV feeds from our car parks, aggregating that all together and automating a message that goes out via Teams to the senior leadership team, who can then make a decision from their bed in the morning about whether we open the site or not, and they don't even need to put their slippers on. The way that we do it at the moment is very inefficient and requires some poor person to go shuffle over to the site and see if it can be opened or not. It's insane, and we need to find a best way of doing it. So that's one we're going to look at this side of Christmas, is automate that, and I think that'd be great for everyone. We can inform all our students and all our staff before 7 about what to do on the day, and I think that's a really interesting use of tech.
It's very interesting for those techies in the meeting. That's there's lots of potential opportunities you can look at there. Mike, we're obviously a couple minutes past the half hour.
Yeah.
Anything you would add into the mix around?
No, just reflect on Ed, automation and AI. That's really what the trend is. So we've already touched on that meeting transcription and summary and action points after that. That thankfully is coming into one-to-one calls, ad hoc meet now, and then hopefully in the future voice calls as well.
Fantastic. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today. With your busy schedule, very, very much appreciated. And I hope for everyone who's come along today, it's been equally important. Please do feel reach out to ourselves. Any questions, I'm sure we can forward on to Ed or answer them ourselves internally. But thanks to everyone, Mike as well. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time, guys.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.